All right, today's subject, we're going to talk about words and that they matter. You know, if President Trump makes a comment on Monday, the markets might go up. If he makes another comment on Tuesday, they might go back down. There's so much power in his words. And sometimes we look at that and say, that's him, it's not me. That's not true. You have a word that will affect people for the rest of their life. So be very careful about your words. You know, I asked you guys that question right now and said, hey, what do you know about your words and how powerful they are? Most of you could actually give me the Christianese answer to that and be correct. The question is, would it look that way if I looked into your life? If I looked at it in my life? We can quote scripture all day long, but if we don't apply it, it doesn't matter. Proverbs 25, which is where we're at this week, it has a lot to say about words. If you look out through all the Proverbs, it's a thing that's strung all the way through it. But here's what I want you to understand today. This isn't about how bad we've been, okay? This isn't about bringing a harsh correction. It's just simply to shed light. What does God want to show you today about your words and the effect that they have? So we're going to start out, we're going to read some verses before we get into the main text for the day. In verse 9 and 10 of Proverbs 25, it says, when arguing with your neighbor, don't betray another person's secret. Others may accuse you of a gossip, and you will never regain your reputation. 23 says this, as surely as a north wind brings rain, so a gossiping tongue causes anger. So think about the way a gossiping tongue. Sometimes we just repeat things, and we don't think it's a big deal. We don't even know if it's true, but we just repeat it. We don't understand the damage that can be done with that. You know, people, if you go gossip to me about Bob, then I'm pretty sure that you're going to gossip about me to other people. And what that's going to do is I will guard my conversations with you because I can't trust you. And it's really hard to get back to where that, you know, we can trust you. And that's a difficult place to be in. And the trail of destruction that happens from gossiping is amazing. We think it's just, oh, it's one little thing, it's not a big deal. But, you know, if we had 10 people and we tell, you know, we do that thing where you go down the line and you say, this is what tell the next person, by the end of it, it usually isn't close to what it began as. The same thing happens with gossiping. When it goes from you to the next person, to the next person, to the next person, to the next person, all of a sudden, this little thing that you said gets blown out of proportion. In verse 11, it says this, timely advice is lovely, like golden apples in a silver basket. And just think about this, because we're just briefly touch on these points, and that is, it's timely. Sometimes we like to give advice. Sometimes it's not asked for. Sometimes it's not well received. But if it's timely advice, it will be well received. And it's the one of the things that, do we actually go to God and say, okay, how do you want me to say this? Should I even say this? The hard part sometimes is when you want to give advice and you can't. So sometimes when my wife and I have conversations, the conversation will start out with, I don't want you to fix it. I just want you to listen. More of the times than not, that's what we ought to be doing, is listening instead of trying to fix it. In verse 12, it says this. Again, it goes back to the listening. One who listens, valid criticism is like gold earrings or other gold jewelry. And what I mean, just an example of that, when I first came on staff and Curtis was here, every once in a while we would get called in the office. And when I was at my other jobs, working aircraft, when you got called in the office, it was usually not as a compliment. Sometimes it was bad news, or it was, hey, we want to work on this. And it took a while to unlearn that going to the office wasn't a bad thing. That he actually has my best interest in his heart. and he would help me walk through many different avenues of even being on staff. One of those, it was that I typically was very task-oriented and can still be that way. And I would sit there and walk by people just to get something done. I made the mistake of telling a certain person, David, that conversation. And what he did to help me with that was, he says, here, let me help you. He would grab my hand when I walk by and say hello, and we'd have a 2 or 3 minute conversation at least. That's to reinforce that people were more important than task. Sometimes we need help with that. The other thing I've learned is a lot of times when you're having a conversation, if we'd sit there and be quiet a little longer, our questions, our input, we'd understand that it wasn't needed. That their person actually knew what needed to be done. But sometimes I have a tendency to interject. In verse 13, it talks about trustworthy messengers. And it says, trustworthy messengers refresh like snow in summer. They revive the spirit of their employer. And when I was reading this, that trustworthy messenger, what does that even mean? And for me, it means, if you're going to tell me no, that means the next person you're going to say to you, the answer is still going to be no, or yes, or any comment that you're going to make to me or to Joe or whoever, your answer is always going to be the same. The other thing that goes along with that is the content of the message does not determine whether or not you deliver the message. If you have bad news or something that somebody might struggle with, does that mean you shouldn't give it to them just because it might hit them wrong? No. The way you deliver it, we'll get into that in a minute, matters, but the content needs to stay the same. That makes it a trustworthy thing when God sits there and speaks something to you. Looking it up, one of the things, it talked about sincerity. And it says they act with clear, transparent motives and no hidden agenda. So if you have an agenda with somebody and you want to talk to them about it, be upfront about it. Don't just sit there and put this out there and not really disclose where you want to go. In verse 15, it says this. A gentle answer deflects anger, but harsh words makes tempers flare. Go ahead and go to the 15:1. A gentle answer, we go there. So the way you say something matters, okay? So if I see Emily walking through the yard, going to youth, and I see a piece of paper drop out of her hand, if I go, Emily, come on, pick that thing up. I don't have to pick it up after you. I got permission for this. But anyway, it's totally different than I say, hey, Emily, I don't know if you noticed, but you dropped a piece of paper. Would you mind picking that up while you're there? It's two different responses from me. It's also two different responses from her. If I yell at her, do I help her or do I hurt her? And sometimes we don't take the time to figure out, maybe all of our answers need to be gentle. When you look at Christ's example, it was exactly that. Verse 20, it says this, singing cheerful songs to a person with a heavy heart is like taking someone's coat in the cold weather or pouring vinegar in their wound. None of those sound pleasant. Okay? But think about it. Sometimes we get in fix-it mode, and we want to cheer somebody up. And by cheering them up, we cheer them up to make ourselves feel better because we don't want to be sad with them. We don't want to feel what they're feeling, and we dismiss what they're feeling. You know, we got these words behind my back here. What's it tell you to do first? Embrace them. It's okay to sit with them in it. It's okay for them to be sad sometimes. There's a healing process that happens in that with your emotions. Do we want them to stay there forever? We don't. But if you sit with them and they feel safe, then you can encourage them. And then later you can equip them. Again, go back to verse 11. Timely advice. You do it too quick, it determines on how well it's going to be received. But our main passage for this morning is verse 18. Telling lies about others is as harmful as hitting them with an axe, wounding them with a sharp sword, or shooting them with a sharp arrow. But what is a lie? Sometimes we look at it as a bold-faced lie where you're just telling an untruth. But you can actually sometimes tell lies because it's what you actually believe. And you actually hurt the other person because you are telling them that's not something that's not from God. And the amount of damage that you can do with that has been amazing as I've watched it through my decades. I'm 66 years old. I've seen some stuff. I've seen where people have told lies. I've seen where people have misled people. And it can be, the damage from that can be a lot. In Proverbs 12, it says this. It says, the words of the reckless pierce like the sword, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. The Message version of that says, rash language cuts and maims, but there is healing in the words of the wise. And what caught my attention was the terms reckless and harsh and brash. Because the reactionary words. How many times as parents have we reacted instead of responded? The way you do that matters. You can do so much damage that you don't even realize you do. But typically those type of reactions are not thought out. Sometimes they're in anger, and sometimes they're actually in intent to hurt. But you have the opportunity to actually bring healing. The choice is going to be yours. In James 3, 5 through 6, we all heard this. In the same way, the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And among all the parts of the body, the tongue is a flame of fire. It is a whole world of wickedness, corrupting your entire body. It can set your whole life on fire, for it itself is on fire, set on fire by hell. If we look at the wildfires, every year the wildfires seem to get worse and worse and worse. You had them out west, you had them in Hawaii, where they went through and devastated communities. In that same way, your words can do that to other people. Lisa and I went on a fishing trip one time, and it was back when Myrtle Beach burned. And we were going to go fishing, and we got up the next morning. We're watching where the fire was at a little bit, but on the way to where we were going, the smoke was so thick that the only reason you knew you went through a stoplight is if you looked up as you were passing it. We actually saw barricades go up behind us at one location. Again, it was a small fire. My understanding was the guy was burning trash, and the wind picked up, and all of a sudden it was gone. Something that could have easily been put out with a water hose was suddenly something that was uncontrollable and burning out of control. Some of these wildfires, it will take decades to heal. In some cases, centuries. And in some cases, the destruction is so rampant that it will never heal. The landslides will happen because there's no root system anymore. And you have this massive landslide, and that landscape will never look the same way it did. Sometimes speaking a lie is actually the truth that you've told yourself and what you actually believe. I'll just use this as an example. The way my family plays games and the way Lisa's family plays games is totally different. My family, you can show your cards to your opponents. You can joke around and have fun. Her family, it's all about get it done, quit smiling, and just play the game. And so my truth was, this is the way you do it. Her truth was, no, we don't do all of that. I got time. This is one other thing I'll say is I went and played golf when I was just learning with her dad. And she'll probably crawl to the seat. She's actually got her face covered. So we're out there, and I was just learning, and I hit this really good, straight down the middle of the fairway, long drive. Walk up to the ball in my next shot, and the dirt went farther than my ball did. So what does the Overfield family do? They act like they're having a heart attack and fall on the ground. Her dad walked up to me and said, "Land, boy, get up and hit the ball." He didn't appreciate it at all. But my point is this, is that sometimes we have something that we feel is a truth because that's the way we were raised. That doesn't make it true. So be very, very careful about what your norm is and thinking that's the way things should be done or that's the way things should be said. You know, I was at, it's been 50 years ago, I guess, or thereabouts. My brother was stillborn. We'd gotten in a car accident, and the baby died. And going to the funeral, and I was, for whatever reason, I think my mom and dad were with the hearse, and I was with a couple of my relatives. And I was crying, and one of them turned to me and said, "Why are you crying? You didn't even know him." And the effect that that had on me was, it's not okay to be sad. It's not okay to cry. I actually didn't cry for decades. I'm making up for lost time now. But my point is this. I became intentionally emotionally dysfunctional because of that comment. Because it wasn't okay to feel sad. It wasn't even okay to cry for any reason. And we can do that, and we don't even realize we've done it. I've seen people live for decades in the shadow of something that was said over them as a kid. Parents, pay attention. It can affect your kids for decades. Simply an offhanded remark, and you didn't go back and correct it. Pay attention to those things that you speak to your kids. I'm still learning. As a grandparent and as a father. You say, why does it matter, though? Let's look at Matthew 12, 36 to 37. You can be sure of this, when the day of judgment comes, everyone will be held accountable for every careless word he has spoken. Your very words will be used as evidence against you, and your words will declare you're either innocent or guilty. One thing to remember sometimes is a lot of times when we have that outburst, shall we say, sometimes it reveals what's actually in our heart. If you have that, you notice that you said something that maybe you shouldn't have or the way you shouldn't have, go back and see what's in your heart and why you reacted that way. Take the time to dig into that and see why it's affecting you. And understand, our speech does have eternal consequences. In Psalm 19, 14, it says this. This is from David. He says, "May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be pleasing to you, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer." David realized he didn't always get it right. He's asking God to help him. Say, hey, I need help in this area. Let my words be pleasing to you. But it takes humility to do that. And sometimes we don't take the time to ask. The problem is that when we tend to use those useless words, it does cause destruction. So you say, okay, how do I fix this? All right, let's go to Proverbs 18:21. The tongue can bring death or life. Those who love to talk will reap the consequences. So kind of remember that too. If you like to talk and hear yourself talk, you might want to reconsider that, considering what we just read in Matthew. That those useless words that you're using, you have to actually give an account for them. But again, going back to where we're speaking life instead of death. And how can I choose to life-giving words? One is to be in the Word. Spend time with the Father and see what He does. How does He respond to you? It's an example of how we should respond to other people. And who you hang out matters. If you hang out with a bunch of gossips, I guarantee you it'll rub off. If you hang around people who are just constantly negative, you will find yourself drifting more and more negative as you're around them. Christ's example was this, though, in John 12:49 through 50. It says, I don't speak on my own authority. The Father who sent me has commanded me what to say and how to say it. Don't miss that. We can sometimes be delivering a message that we feel God has given us, but we don't take the time to ask, how am I supposed to deliver this? It continues on with, I know his commands lead to eternal life, so I say whatever the Father tells me to say. Do we look at that in our life? Is that how we respond to people with that eternal outlook in mind? Not only our outlook, but other people's. Proverbs 16:24 says this, kind words are like honey, sweet to the soul and healthy to the body. We can learn to use these kind words. We can learn to identify maybe when we're not using kind words. That's going to be your first step. Understand that those words can heal not only injuries that you have, but injuries that they have from other people who have talked. Ephesians 4:29. We're going to read several different versions of the same thing. And never let ugly or hateful words come from your mouth, but instead let your words become beautiful gifts that encourage others. Do this by speaking words of grace to help them. Don't use foul or abusive language. Let everything you say be good and helpful, so that your words will be an encouragement to those who hear them. Watch the way you talk. Let nothing foul or dirty come out of your mouth. Say only what helps, each word a gift from God. You must let no unwholesome word come out of your mouth, but only what is beneficial for the building up of the one who is in need, that it may give you the grace to those who hear it. So, first part of that is avoid damaging talk, corruptive talk. Instead, speak ways that edify people, that build them up, that encourage them. Use your speech to impart grace and support those around you. One of the questions I'd ask is, if you think you're doing it pretty good, ask your spouse, ask your friends, how am I doing in this area? Proverbs 15:4 says this, gentle words are a tree of life. A deceitful tongue crushes the spirit. When you speak the healing words, you offer others fruit from the tree of life. But unhealthy, negative words do nothing but crush their spirits. Again, it just goes to that point of what you say and how you say it matters. Your tone, your body language. Does that mean you never correct anybody? It doesn't. Does that mean you shouldn't correct your children? It doesn't. Just understand this is what you don't correct, you condone. So if your child is acting in a way that you don't think is good and you don't say anything, you think, oh, it's not that big a deal, you're actually telling them it's okay. But how you correct them is important. You know, it talks about no corrupt saying should come out of our mouth. Man's heart naturally is still in his sinful ways, and it's easy to come out with that corrupted heart. The question is do we ask God of how we respond? Most of the time, I don't think we do. But we have to also ask him, if you're a parent, I'd encourage you to sit there and say, God, show me. How do I correct my child? You know, sometimes we can feel an injustice deserves a harsh response. Something that was really hard for us or hard on us, that somebody really hurt us. And we think, you know what, I need to address this. I need to address it so they understand that it isn't okay. And like I was talking about in prayer this morning, is when we look at the fall of man and we look at Adam and Eve, what they did was wrong. And everything that's wrong in the world right now falls squarely on their shoulders. If anybody deserved to be destroyed, right then and there. In my mind, it was them. But we look at God's response. He sits there and calls out to them. He knows where they are, but he asks them where they are. He understands that when they talk about their shame, that he still called out to them where they were right then. He clothed them. It's no different than what Jesus did for us on the cross. We have our own shame. We have our own nakedness. It's only through Christ that we can accept, when we accept Christ, that he covers that. But God's response, like I said, was to call out to them. Jesus' response is to call out to us. It's something we can't earn, but it also should be a pattern that I should strive to follow. And sometimes that's hard. You know, if we look at the political system right now, and we look at how divided the country is off of the words that we see, it's a mess. It's out there to basically divide the country and destroy it, not to unify it. And you say, that's just them. But the way you speak matters. The way you talk to your coworkers matters. If you gossip about your coworkers, it matters. Okay? We had an issue with a contractor, and I was venting to my wife, and she said, okay, if you say all that, even though it's true, are you going to be able to witness to them? Think about that. Think about the effect that you could have on their lives because you represent Christ to them. And that's one of the things I think that has really hurt the church is sometimes we are so judgmental of people who don't believe like we do. We don't sit there and embrace them like we're supposed to. We don't show them the love of Christ. And we justify it by our perception of what's right and wrong. Is there a right and wrong? There absolutely is. There's a right and wrong way to address it. Things I have to ask myself. Who is and has spoken into my life? And the ones that are still speaking into your life, should they? If you have people that have spoken into your life and you just hear negative things from them all the time, be careful. The more you hang out around them, the more you're going to believe it. Again, it goes back to, do I only say what the Father tells me to say? And the way that he told me to? I think that's the hard one for me. Are my words encouraging us to be all that God has called us to? Or are they destroying the dreams that God has put in people's hearts? Do I speak more words of construction or destruction to others? If you had to tally up your words for the last week, where would those fall? Along with that, though, goes, what are the words I say about myself? Am I speaking to myself in a negative way that I'm crushing the things that God has spoken over my life? The enemy will tell you lies. That's his, we know that about him. He's going to steal, kill, and destroy. It's not only possessions, it's also what you believe about yourself. It's also about the words that have been spoken about you. So the question at the end of the day is, what is it I'm going to speak? Am I going to bring death, injury, or am I going to bring healing? And ask the Holy Spirit to reveal to you about how you speak. Because it's important. You will answer for that one day. And we can affect so many people just by the way we respond to them, the way that we act.